Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum and salam sejahtera. In this session, we want to discuss about allowances in time standard. In all of the work measurement techniques, the normal time is adjusted by an allowance factor to obtain the standard time. Allowances are used because there will be periods during the regular work shift when the worker is not working. The purpose of the allowance factor is to compensate for this lost time by providing a small increment of allowance time in each cycle. This way, even with the time losses, the operator will still be able to complete a fair day's work during the hours of the shift. So if we look at this formula here, yeah, there are allowance factor given uh, to determine the time standard time. Yeah. To calculate standard time, there are allowance given there. Yeah. So there are various reasons why people do not work continuously during a regular shift. Some of the interruptions are work related while others are not. So this table here lists some typical causes of interruptions that occur in the industrial work. Uh, First is the work related interruption, and there are also listed non-work related interruptions. So you can see that work-related interruption, the machine breakdowns, waiting for materials or parts, receiving instruction from foreman, talking to the co-workers about work-related matters, rest break for fatigue, cleaning up at end of shift, yeah? And non-work related interruptions, personal needs, example, the worker have to go to restroom breaks, talking to co-workers about matters unrelated to work, lunch break, smoke break, beverage breaks, personal telephone call, and etc. So there are no denying that these interruptions occur during the work shift, and there is no denying that allowance time is some form should be provided to deal with them. The question is how much should be allowed and how should it be provided to the worker. So companies address the allowance issue using two basic approaches, often in the combinations. First, schedule the break periods during the shift. Yeah, schedule rest break during the shift. Second, using a personal fatigue delay allowance added to the normal time. PFD stands for personal fatigue delay allowance added to the normal time. Okay, so on the first approach, schedule rest breaks during the shift. The scheduled breaks are planned periods set aside during the shift as break time from work. Example, lunch breaks are almost always handled this way. Many companies track uh, rest breaks the same way. This is specified rest break in the morning and one in the afternoon. The duration of these breaks is typically 5 to 15 minutes, and all workers take their breaks during these specified times, and the workers are paid during these breaks. In this approach, the shift is scheduled with breaks to divide the workday into periods of roughly equal length. For example, the day shift begins at 8 a.m. in the morning and ends at 8:40 p.m. Start from 8 a.m. and at 4:30 p.m. And there is a 15 minutes rest break in the mid-morning, a lunch break from noon to 12:13, and another 15 minutes rest break in the mid-afternoon. Accordingly, the shift lasts 8.5 hours, which include 8 hours of paid time. Yeah? So that's the first approach. The second approach, the companies using the PFD allowance. Yeah, PFD allowance. So in this approach, an appropriate value of the personal time, fatigue, and delay (PFD allowance) factor uh, is determined for use in converting the normal time into the standard time. If result in extra time prorated in the time standard to compensate for the interruption experienced by the worker during the shift, both work-related and non-work-related. Some companies include rest break in the allowance rather than using a scheduled break time for everyone as described above. So, example of type of allowance is personal times that include restroom breaks, phone calls, water fountain visit, and similar interruption of a personal nature. A typical allowance for this category of interruption is 5%. A larger value would be appropriate if the work environment is hot and uncomfortable, and a lower value will be used for very favorable working conditions. So it depends on the working conditions, how much the company will be provided the personal times allowance for the work. The second type of allowance is a fatigue or rest allowance. Is intended to compensate the worker for time that must be taken to overcome fatigue due to work-related stress and conditions. For example, if the work physiologically very demanding and the worker expends significant metabolic energy in performing the task, then relaxation time should be allowed periodically for the body to recover. Some of the factors that cause fatigue in human workers combination of the rest formula and negotiation between labor and management. So that example of fatigue allowance. The delay allowance are an avoidable interruption from work that occur at random times during the day. They usually refer to work-related events, such as some of the interruption listed that we have discussed in the previous tables. So it should be mentioned that the work delay associated with workers' performance needs. Okay. So this is example of allowance that been considered in calculating the time standard. So again, if you look at this formula of standard time, yeah. So this is the normal time, normal time, and this is the allowance given in the task or element to get the standard time value. Yeah. So that's the discussion on allowance in time standard. Again, there are various work-related or non-work related interruption can happen in the task, and there are, in general, there are two approaches used by companies to compensate this lost time. Yeah. First, using the scheduled rest breaks during the shift, or using personal fatigue delay allowance that is added to the normal time. Okay, thank you.